We are live. Um, I am about to introduce the guest. You know what? Let me bring him in and we'll just go from there. There he is. There he is.
Oh,
Mike
buddy, how are
Kriegel,
you?
how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Nice hot day here in New York. You're where in the country are you now? You're in Cali?
California. Yeah.
Okay. We um we share. We're both New Yorkers, born and raised. Um,
It's not my fault.
but people don't realize you're from Manhattan, right?
Hmm.
Well, what neighborhood?
8th Avenue. Like 2 blocks from the garden. I remember when Gleason's was on 30th Street.
So that's technically, I guess, that's just like Midtown, right?
No, it was Chelsea. It was like before Chelsea was cool.
Right, right. So people don't realize very few Manhattanites. I guess that's what we're called, right? Manhattanites. Most people are from the boroughs, but we're from Manhattan, and that's rare. And there's a bond there. There's a bond that only Manhattanites, I think, go through growing up.
We got a bond.
A little bit, a little bit, a
All right.
little bit. But for those watching, Mark is a journalist, is an author, uh, boxing analyst, boxing commentator. Um, so you've done a lot in your life, obviously. You were involved in the NFL. You did a whole bunch of things, but you ended up falling right on boxing, right? Sticking to boxing. So I'm curious. Let's just kind of a brief background. What got you into your love for boxing?
I think the short answer, I was covering, I was a general assignment reporter at the Daily News,
Okay.
starting in 88. And I was covering basically cops in courts. A lot of organized crime. It was like, crack dealers, like big crack dealers. The city was kind of exploding then, and a lot of mafia trials.
Okay.
And I played a lot of basketball, and I did some basketball pieces at the news. And in 90, was it 90? Late 90, the news went on strike. The Post, without Murdoch wasn't there at the time. They were hard up for money, so they had to lay people off. So months into the strike, um, the Post hired me as a sports columnist, which they had no business doing. I'd never even like covered a ball game, but they figured it'd be a good idea. So I went from covering cops in courts to a general sports column. And I love basketball. I grew up basically a block and a half from the Garden. Um, but after a while, the only sport I really loved covering was boxing. And it's probably because it most resembles organized crime.
It does.
It's also, I mean, like from my perspective, the stuff I'm interested in, like fame, masculinity, um, by coincidence, fathers and sons, because I didn't plan to cover um, a sport like this because it's all of a sudden everyone's coach is their father, but it,
Right.
it just happened. But I loved it. It's the best for me. It's the best sport for storytelling. And you can make the same case about MMA. The difference between wherever you stand on MMA and boxing, the difference between MMA and boxing, to me, and it's an important one, is that unlike MMA, boxing has a past and it's rich,
Mm.
and that makes it more compelling and sometimes romantic and other times haunted to write about.
Well, one can argue that MMA is a bit of a branch off from boxing, no?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember covering like for Esquire, before Dana White. Maybe it was like late '95, early '96. One of the first UFC things, but at the time there were no weight classifications. It was just like bring a karate guy and he'll fight a wrestler, or he'll fight a kung fu guy, and it was like hanging out in the school yard, yo, who could kick whose ass, you know, and it was an interesting proposition. But I remember that it was just the kind of, it was still called, they called it human cockfighting. It was outlawed.
Right.
So I mean, the sports caught up a long way. I think in a lot of ways, like look, I like boxing, but I think in a lot of ways MMA has exposed boxing's greatest weakness, which is matchmaking. And if I were an MMA fighter, I'm not sure I'd be happy with Dana White controlling, the big bank. But as a fan, there's something to be said for, okay, you fight him and you fight him, and that's the way it's going to be. Instead of in boxing, where you wind up, everything marinates until guys are, basically ready to get Social Security.
Well, it's weird because, in basketball, nobody really said anything about David Stern or whoever the new bald guy's name is, running everything.
Adam.
People just want Adam, right? People just want to make the NBA, and once they're there, they're happy. But in boxing or in MMA, it's not like that. And I wonder what the difference. Or NFL, same thing. People want to make the NBL, the NFL, the NBA. They're happy. But with boxing, I mean, there is no organization, but nobody would be happy anyway. Nobody's
happy. Too many organizations.
Too many, right? Well, and there's not one specific one. There's no umbrella to be under. It's just all over the place. And it's always been that way, right? Because maybe you could help me with this. So I was trying to figure out.
No, it's gotten more screwed up. I mean, look, if you were a fan, the reality is, I hate to say this, it's not just, but it worked better as a sport when the mob ran it, in the 40s.
They were kind of,
but it was also, there wasn't professional football in the same way you have today. There certainly wasn't professional basketball in the same way you have today. There was baseball, there was horse racing, and there was boxing. So I mean, boxing was probably like the second most important professional sport.
Right.
And it was a different economic climate. Guys had to fight each other,
Right. And now boxing is probably the least well-known, the least sport of notoriety of all the majors in America.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're right, and only schmucks like us, I guess, like it. But the problem is that the more sanctioning bodies, the more divisions, the fewer fighters you have. It's just it's kind of a mess.
It is.
But if you look. I'm sorry. What I meant to say was, if you look at boxing's place in the universe of sports, it's all the way down. But if you look at like boxing's place in cinema, for example, like boxing movies are over here, and boxing as a sport is over here, and that's kind of interesting because what that means is it's still a great storytelling sport. It's just the stories are not being told through the sport.
Right. And now you had mentioned to me that you had boxed yourself, right? I'm curious briefly. I mean, at what did we have? Did you have amateur fights? Or you just in the gym sparring?
Just in the gym.
Gym.
I remember the first time anyone actually taught me anything about how to move, how to hit a bag. It was in the McBurney Y, like maybe around 2000. They used to have a little boxing room in the McBurney Y.
Where's that Y?
Track, 23rd Street.
Okay.
It doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
And then at Gleason's for a while. And when I came out here, I used to go to Wild Card a lot. I go to this place, Churchill. But every time I do anything now, I like something else breaks.
My first gym I ever went to was the old Kingsway.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yep.
It looked like it was tape in the window with the big white letters.
Uh-huh. and Times Square back then was not a pretty place.
I remember.
Yeah, yeah. So
Up on 8th
now,
Avenue.
right, exactly, right. I grew up on 11th, so similar. Okay, so did your father box at all?
No,
No, because he was as well. He was an author, right? If I'm not mistaken, he was a professor at LIU, right?
City College.
Oh, City College. Okay. So did you? Is it fair to say that you got your passion for journalism from your father?
My dad wasn't a journalist. He was a professor. Um, he was an essayist. Um, he liked boxing in the romantic New York sense, but no, it didn't come from didn't come from.
Okay. Okay. So you started when you were sparring. Now, just so I get the chronology correct, what point in your life was this? Was it when you were younger, older?
No, older. So
Oh,
I guess the first time I actually had a proper guy called me out. Like I don't think I won a street fight since like second grade. And I remember this. And the guy, for whatever reason, he had like a hard on for me at Gleason's.
okay.
And I was training with this guy, and I loved it. And the guy just decides, like, let's set something up. And he's bigger than me, and I'm sure he'd been doing it longer. And you know how when you start, you figure everyone's doing it longer than you are, right?
Right.
So, and I remember running into him one day. We set up a time to go, like rounds and everything. Yeah, I think it was the middle ring at Gleason's. And the first thing you notice, this is like, God, it was so long ago. First thing you notice is when you're on a platform, everybody's been watching you.
Right.
And it's different. And that's like, I don't know if it's different than the street, but it's its own thing because it's not just you and him. It's you, him, and the audience.
Well, what I tell people, and I want to hear the rest of the story, but to interject, the difference between boxing and street fighting is a big one. It's when you're angry in the street, when you're mad, it's easy to just jump off, pop off, and fight. But when you sit there and you say, "Okay, I'm gonna see you tomorrow," and you got to sit and marinate on that all night.
Let me tell you, right? So I'm like, oh shit, and I'd messed around a little bit before, but not anyone calling it like a fight, even though it was just bullshit sparring. And we're waiting and waiting, like it's a week, it's a couple days, and I ran into the guy, and I was sick, and I was nervous as fuck, for real. I said, I'm not feeling, He goes, and he turned and he goes like, you're not gonna pussy out, are you? Right? And like it was a real pointed remark. Like for whatever reason, something about me pissed him off, and he thought he could step on it. So, I thought about it for a second. I realized like having a sore throat. Maybe I was just like psychosomatic.
Right.
So I go, no. So I go there, we glove up. I got a guy in my corner. He got someone in his corner. And I'm nervous. Like, I'm racing. I have so much adrenaline. And so we start. And I just, I start jabbing him. I start jabbing him. And it's the strangest thing. I was too nervous to even let go of a right hand. But I start, and like some of them were actually connected. And we get to the first round. I go back to the corner. I'm like, is that all right? The guy says, yeah, you're doing fine. Like, relax. And we start going again. And I don't know if it was in the second or at the start of the third. This guy quits. I'm like, holy shit. Like, I just won the Super Bowl. Like the lottery. I'm because you have that. You see it in any kind of fighter. Like, when all of a sudden it's lifted, and then the first thing you do is then you go over and thank the guy, even though
Right.
I cracked him a little bit by then. I just couldn't believe he quit after like calling me a pussy.
What was his reason for
I
stopping?
don't. He just. I was winning because I just don't have it today. You know, like I've got my ass kicked. You know, but stopping it in the it was
Right.
something after all of that.
Right.
So I remember going out with a friend of mine after, like a guy I knew, like from the newspaper business. And I told him what happened. I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. Like, I haven't won a fight since second grade, PS 33. And he says to me, holy shit, you just got like the New Yorker's dream. I said, what was that? He goes, the guy was a contractor, right? He says, oh, you kicked the contractor's ass. So whatever.
That was good. Okay, so now how old were you at this point?
Had to be I'm born in 1962, so like 40ish.
40. Okay. Okay. Wow. Okay. And then from that point on, you'd spar just sporadically every now and then.
Sporadically every now. I mean, like I came out to California in 2005, and I started going to Freddie's place a lot.
Freddie Roach.
Yeah, Wild Card. And it was like I was getting divorced, and I had to be like the only like Jewish guy from New York who didn't know anyone in LA. And it was therapy. It was like
Yeah.
it was great for me. I didn't spar much, maybe like once or twice, and then there's a couple gyms out more by me, like in Santa Monica. I started going regularly, and then a guy named Pete Berg, the director, opened for me, a great gym out here, and for a long time, until my body just finally betrayed me, which is probably merciful.
Do you still hit the bag and work out, or no more?
Yeah, I got to go in and get a shoulder done. Yeah, no, but we would go like 2 or 3 times a week when we started it up, and it was like it was wonderful. Like for me, I don't want to kick anyone's ass, and I definitely don't want to get my ass kicked. But it was a great, liberating experience.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, I had basketball stuff. My knees were already arthritic, and the last time I got in the ring, and I was like, oh, I don't need to warm up. I can move around with this guy. Last time I got in the ring to spar, my hamstring tore.
Oh shit.
Right. Like I don't need to stretch. No. Now I stretch everything, even though it's no good.
Yeah.
I was like, I just took a step back and ping, and wow. Thank God, like the ropes are there. But
wow. Yeah, that's no good. Yeah. Okay. Well, so like
that's about as glorious as my career gets.
No, that's hey man.
Hamstring.
People don't realize what's sparring is. It's no joke. That's why I really get upset at. Besides the fact that I fought, but regardless, I get upset when people call other fighters bums or anybody who gets in there. I have respect for them. Anybody. Even in sparring. I don't respect the contractor though, because you never quit. That's one thing you shouldn't do. But I guess that Kriegel jab was getting them good. So
it was the first and the last time for everything.
Yeah. So kind of shifting topic a little, I remember seeing you recently interviewed Teofimo, right? And I actually, funny enough, interviewed him a day or two before that, him and his dad. And it was the one where you were speaking with Tio, and his dad comes in, and he starts talking about going into almost like a dark, like, I don't care if I die in the ring. And
no, what happened was it was the lead up to the Josh Taylor fight.
Right.
And Teofimo had said some stuff in the lead up, I guess about Top Rank and other fighters, that the dad was really concerned about me asking, and they knew I had to ask him. And I know the dad's like controversial, but like I like him. He sounds like every guy I knew in the park in New
Yeah,
York, or like
he's a
in
New
St.
Yorker.
Columbus, you know.
He's a Puerto Rican guy from New York,
He's
definitely.
Honduran. And Tiafimo,
Uh,
I mean, I wrote a piece on Tiafimo on the eve of his first title shot, and interviewed him a lot before and since. And I think the kid's like extraordinary. I think what he's gone through is extraordinary. I think his talent is extraordinary.
yeah,
Um, he's still, to me, the most dynamic and exciting of all the young fighters. Like, I don't know what I'm going to get, but I know when he's right, man, it's good. It's really good. And you know, beating Josh Taylor like that was an extraordinary accomplishment. And he just reminded everyone of how good he can be, how good he should be. Um, anyway, I really liked him, but you know, they had this thing, him and his dad, and it's pretty intense. So the dad comes in, but the camera's running, and it's like, hey, you know, and then they go through this whole dance. Um, and you know, you can go find the interview yourself. But
right,
I
right.
didn't. I wanted to shut it down at that point.
You did.
Part of me, yeah. I just thought the damn thing had become such a mess, and their relationship is complicated, and it was tense, and it was the lead up to the fight. And my instincts were wrong. We went back and we discussed, you know, what do we do with this stuff, and what did he say? And the producer's like, hey, listen, no one can't come in to our room with a live camera and just do that. That what happened there meant something. And I
Right.
think the producer and I came up with a fair piece, a piece that it certainly approximated what happened that day. It's very difficult, especially in a relationship that's like as intense and as much push and pull as Tiafimo and his dad. Um,
Yeah.
but I really like. I got to tell you, like from the beginning, he might be pissed off at me or not. I've always liked this kid. I really, really have. I find, you know, like sometimes to me he can get a little nutty, but there's something in there that's for all the braggadocio that's talented and vulnerable. And you know, he might not want to, you know, fighters never want to be vulnerable, but there's something in there that's a lot of guys talk about being charismatic. He actually is.
Well, you know, to your point.
Sometimes I think he listens to his own stuff too much, and there's no one there to tell him like, "Hey, kid, calm down." But that's my opinion. I've always liked him. I'm sorry, Marco.
It's okay. Well, to your point about him not being wanting to be vulnerable, you're right. But at the same time, he's also one of the first fighters at that level I can recall to talk about mental health, to talk about going to therapy, to leave himself open for something like that in a sport
I
where,
mean, in all due respect, I think it was in the piece I wrote about him in right before he fought Comey, and you know, he was married then, and you know, he's
yeah,
got so many changes, but I really I admired how open he was in that piece. It takes a lot of balls,
yeah,
especially as a kid, to to come to terms with that, but to come to terms with that or attempt to come to terms with all that stuff publicly. I
yeah,
thought it spoke well of him at the time.
yeah. Especially in boxing. Boxing more than any other sport, I feel like, is that's one of the biggest no-nos is show vulnerability, show weakness.
Right.
Um, you know. So, have you had any other instances? I'm sure you have, but what other instances in boxing have you had similar to that, where something while you're doing a live interview or something like that happens?
I'd have to think. I don't.
Nothing comes off the top. Okay.
Some will come while you're shooting.
Or yeah.
No, I mean, plenty of them have been pretty tense, and I had to ask, delicate stuff.
Now, how beforehand, I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, you go over what they want you to ask, what they don't want you to ask? No.
I mean, sometimes sometimes I'll give the subject a heads up. I shouldn't say some. I mean, um, just so he or she doesn't feel like it's coming out of the blue. Um,
Interesting. I would have thought that
but I mean, in that respect, with Tiafimo, his dad came in the room because look, he wanted to protect his kid. That's the first thing. I respect that, because he knew I was going to have to ask him these touchy questions. I mean, I've been through this ritual with Tiafimo and his dad a bunch of times by then, and his dad knew what I was going to ask him about, and he wanted to come in and protect his kid. That's what he said. I don't think he did it the easiest way. I think, but that's what it is.
okay. So pushing a little forward, before the Spence and Crawford fight happened, who did you think was gonna prevail?
Crawford.
Were you surprised at the relative ease at which it occurred?
I thought he'd win decisively. I really did. I thought it was a high chance he'd knock him out.
Wow.
I didn't think he'd win that easy.
So,
but also now now you have a pretty good idea. But everyone has their own biases in each broadcast. Don't let anyone bullshit you. Has its bias,
right?
Because you're naturally inclined to see things from the point of view of the fighters you cover the most, right? So we'd seen a lot of Crawford, and I had some pretty intense interviews with Crawford. That made me like him, and made me. But we had the ESPN crew had a pretty clear, full idea of what he could do, of how incredibly talented he was. Now I think you have an idea why people weren't lining up to fight him. It wasn't just being across the street or whatever the hell you want to say, which is something, by the way, when you talk about the old days in boxing, you didn't have these across the street setup. In any event, you saw there how good Crawford really is.
Yeah.
I mean, what did you think going in?
I was leaning towards Crawford. So I talked with Zab Judah about this, and he said something to me that was interesting. I was like asking him, who do you think's going to win? He goes, weigh in. Wait till the weigh in. So I was like, huh. So after the weigh in, I was leaning towards Crawford at first. And then when I saw them at the press conference, Spence looked relatively significantly bigger. And I heard he had platform shoes on and whatever. So then I said,
Mark, remember something. Spence debuted at 54.
right.
154.
Right.
And I mean, I've been in the gym. I watched Spence beat up, I think, cruiserweights.
Right.
He's an incredibly physically imposing guy.
Exactly.
He's been at 47 for a long time. He's a naturally much bigger guy. Crawford, especially when he was younger, you can see how spindly he was. What did he start at, 30 or 35?
I think it was 30, 35.
I mean, look, he won titles at 35
and 40.
35 and 40. But I don't remember if he started at 30 or not. But
right.
In any event.
Right. No. So when I hear that Spence walks around at 180, I hear all, I know Derek James. I heard all this stuff, but So initially, I was leaning towards Crawford because of Crawford's boxing skill. And
Mhm.
then when I saw the size difference, I was like, well, wait, size matters, but I always say this only if you know how to use it, right? And Spence knows how to use it. But then after the weigh-in, when I looked at their frames, Crawford looked slightly more of he looked more muscular to me, looked a little wider, looked a little bigger. And that's when I started leaning towards Crawford again. But the imperative word is lean. I did not expect what happened.
I think that Bomac was right. Bomac said, I guess it was at the press conference, like Spence's best shot was when Terrence first got to 47. And I think that there was an adjustment period. He started out by fighting Jeff Horn.
Right.
And whatever else you want to say about Jeff Horn, he's a big, strong guy, especially for 47.
Right.
And I think it took, there was a little bit of an adjustment period. But I always thought from the beginning, Terrence had more stuff. He's gotten more powerful. He's gotten more comfortable in the weight, but he always had more stuff.
Right.
The idea that, that he can go from left to right that fluidly is extraordinary.
Sure. His bag has way more tricks in it, So after the fight was said and done, what was your takeaway from that?
The same as everyone else. Wow. I mean, I don't buy all of this stuff now about Spence was weight drained and he had an off night. And I read something today about Crawford, like throwing illegal shots. Like, come on, man, stop, cut the bullshit.
Oh yeah, somebody said, oh Charlo.
Yeah, I mean, like, come on, really, cut it out.
Well, what do you think? So here's something
he's that good.
He is amazing, but here's something that I did notice for sure, and I'm not saying this has anything to do with the outcome of the fight, but Spence did look a little glazed over. People are saying he was high. I don't think he was.
You're
high.
A fighter, man. You're a fighter. You're fighting at 47. You sign the deal. You're 47. That's what it is.
So you think his look and he kind of was a little slower with speech? You think all that was just the weight training?
I don't know if it's the weight drain or not, but I do know this, and you know it a lot better than I do. Okay, making weight, preparing, is part of the sport.
Yeah,
it might be. I mean, Andre Ward used to say this a lot. It remind us. It's the only sport where, every other sport you prepare by getting stronger and bigger and feeding your body and fueling it and all the rest, right? In boxing, you make yourself stronger, but you tear yourself down in the process.
Yeah.
And that's part of it, man. That's part of what it means to be a really tough guy. It's your discipline. It's your emotional and mental hold on yourself as you train. That's part of it, man. That's part of what being a tough guy means. So all of that stuff, I'm not buying any of it.
So with that said, do you feel like there would be a difference if they fight at 154 rematch?
It may be. It may be. I'd still think Crawford would be a decisive favorite. Yeah. I'd love to see, because I think the promotion would be so great. I'd love to see Charlo and Crawford. I'm not dying to see Charlo and Canelo. It's two weight divisions. I feel the same way about Charlo Canelo that I felt about Spence and
Pacquiao.
No, God, I'm blanking. Robert's brother, kid, Mikey
Garcia. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, I understand you want to go make a score by moving up, but it's not, it's not an enticing sporting proposition.
No,
I would have much rather have seen Mikey fight at the time. Lomachenko was pound for pound number one, or Crawford, who was still at 40. or just moved up to 47. But I mean, look, he had a beef with Top Rank. Okay, that's business. But I would have loved to have seen at 35 or even 30, somewhere down there, Lomachenko and Mikey. And I think Mikey would have done great.
Yeah.
He has such an economical sense of movement, and he has power.
Right.
As far as Mikey and Crawford, they had history going back to the amateurs. And if I'm not mistaken, Crawford beat Mikey pretty decisively.
Okay. 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 So that fight, the rematch. I mean, I personally, I'm not crazy about seeing the Crawford Spence rematch. But then that begs the question: who is left for Crawford to fight? You know, Canelo and Charlo fight in like 2 or 3 months.
Right.
He said he's not fighting. Canelo's made it clear. Canelo, even if he wins, he's not going down to fight.
Right. No, I think that's too. Yeah, I understand that. I don't blame Canelo for that.
So who does Crawford really fight next? That anybody really, because Crawford made it clear, which I agree with him. He's looking for either big money or legacy or both fights.
And he should. And he's been made to wait in line for so damn long.
Right.
I think the first thing you have to look for is what does Spence do? That's number one. So it's his option. I'm pretty sure it's his option to go to 54. And I think that, like, I would definitely like to see that at 54. Let people, there's so much talk about, 47, he was weight drained. Wait, how come he was never weight drained before? Now he's weight drained?
Right.
In any event, but I think that would be an interesting fight at 54. I'd much prefer to see Crawford and Charlo.
Yeah, so would I. So you could care less about Charlo versus Canelo? Who do you think is going to win?
It's not that I would care less. Look, but I think I think of it as Mikey and Spence. I think it's Canelo.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong. We'll see.
If
Canelo insists on throwing single shots, he could wind up with some difficulty. But I think you got to like him going to the fight.
Sure. I absolutely think he'll probably. I would have to think, if I had to bet, that he would stop Charlo.
By the way, this has become. I don't like this fight as matchmaking. I think there's way better fights for Canelo and for Charlo. But wait, there's this phenomenon that's come up this decade. Like, guys think it's a worthwhile career to just spend years calling out Canelo. And what you really see is the best way to make your case is not by talking shit and hoping Canelo bites. It's by fighting other guys and knocking them out. I guess we'd both rather see Canelo Benavidez, right?
Of course.
All right. So the way that's going to line up, it's going to be like at the end of time. I'm a boxing fan. I want to see Benavidez fight great fighters, like not fight. Yeah. I thought that the Plant fight was interesting, but I want to see more.
Right.
He's an interesting fighter. He's fluid. He's powerful. But I don't want to wait a year in between fights for this kid.
Right. I mean, the only fight for him, really, unless he moves up to light heavyweight, Benavidez, that is Canelo. But that's tied up for at least until like November, December, January next year at minimum.
Look, there's guys at 68 who can fight.
Right.
I mean, there's always guys. What I find unfortunate is everybody holds on to the O or holds on to their rep just so they can get a shot at Canelo. I mean, I thought that, for instance, Golovkin did himself a disservice at the tail end of his career. However you see the fights, if he was jobbed or not, I thought that the second decision was fair. I thought that Canelo really outboxed him and controlled. Okay. But just to spend years whining about Canelo instead of fighting guys, it's not interesting. And
Right. Well,
it doesn't make your case. You make your case by putting really you make your case by putting sensational performances on film.
right.
Okay.
I agree with you, but there's also the juxtaposition of that, which is he could fight 7 or 8 of these great other fighters, and he makes way more money and more notoriety in one Canelo fight. So they want that lottery. You know what I mean?
I understand that. I'm just saying that I understand why they're doing it, and if I were in their position, I might do it too.
Right.
But it's one of the many reasons why the sport is atrophying.
Right. And I think Canelo, to your point about the Charlo fight not being a good fight, I think he's fighting Charlo because Canelo has had two not the best, one loss and one he wants a safe fight that's gonna, build up his confidence back, put him on that platform and pedestal that his fans are used to seeing him. And that's why I think he's doing it, because it doesn't make any sense. Charlo's taking it for the money, but if it wasn't for the notoriety and the money, he wouldn't want to put himself into that kind of fight because it's a risky fight for Charlo, real risky.
It's not a risky score. Like the same thing with Mikey. Like I think that and you make a decision. Mike, I think that Mikey wanted to make a score. It's unfortunate to me, but I'm not in his body. I'm not taking the risk.
Right.
I think Mikey had great talent and should be remembered as a great fighter.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I would have rather have seen the best really fight the best in relatively same weight classes than jumping up to make a score.
Exactly. And then, along the same note here is Fury fighting Ngannou. What do you think about that?
I think Fury. This is my litmus test, my personal. Like, if a guy's special, does he look like anyone else? Does he fight like anyone else? And Fury, with 85 inches in reach, and he can box, and he's become more rugged. Wow, that's really interesting. But if I'm being honest, I really like the guy.
Yeah.
He hasn't had a fight since Dillian White. That was a long time ago, and Dillian White was past.
Yes.
His expiration date. And we went over there to cover it in Wembley. I've never seen anything like it. It gave me hope for boxing, to fill a stadium with probably 100,000 people or damn close to it.
Wow.
That was incredible. But whatever the business reason is, I'm tired of it, man. Fight Usyk. Guys, do it. I never heard like rematch clauses and
well,
stop it already.
My opinion, and tell me if you agree, I saw this trend when Floyd and Pacquiao.
But a lot of it started there. I'm sorry.
This quote, the A side talk drives me crazy. And it's what I think is corrupting all of these and preventing all of these mega fights now, this A side thinking.
But think about this. Like it took, I guess they started talking. Pacquiao and Mayweather became a topic in like 2008.
I think like 6 or 7.
2007, yeah, okay. And they fight in what, 15?
Yeah.
Okay. 15 or 16? I don't know, or whatever. Yeah. But it took them twice as long to get one fight in. And they were both past their prime. That much we know, both of them.
Right.
However easily Floyd handled it. It took them twice as long to make one fight that turned out to be boring as hell than it took Ali and Frazier to stage the greatest trilogy we've ever seen. Or at least I think so. And the sport doesn't grow from guys not fighting. The sport doesn't grow from like marinating for that long. You get a wine that's too old, it tastes like piss. sorry, or Vinnick, whatever. You don't. No one gets over not fighting. You get rich and famous by fighting. Now, there's enormous risk. I understand that. And personally, I'm no one to judge. But if you're examining what's wrong, there you go. I mean,
Yep.
you know, Joshua and Fury should be on their third fight now. The only, and a truly interesting trilogy, even though it turned out to be one sided, was Wilder and Fury, right?
Right.
And the first fight, especially, I was there, was magical, but it wasn't expected to be a competitive fight, and that's why it was made. It was a bullshit fight. I mean, people were talking. Is Frank Warren just like, is he cashing out on Fury now? That was
Oh,
the talk.
you're saying that they thought Fury was going to get dispatched?
Fury was like in the not too distant past. Fury was talking about, was suicidal, was nuts.
Right.
That comeback was that he made, from like 400 and whatever pounds, and was extraordinary. But the trilogy only happened because the first installment was supposed to be like easy money, and it turned out to be something that no one expected on many levels. So that's why it was made. No one was expecting some epic trilogy from Tyson Fury.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And then it ended up being, as you said, very one-sided. So,
We're going on like 47 minutes here.
oh yeah.
People are going to die of boredom listening to me.
Well, we'll wrap it up shortly. So what I wanted to say though, as we kind of run towards the finish line here, do you have any interest in the Fury fight with Ngannou?
I mean, do I have any interest? I might be covering it. Tyson Fury is always interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, and you're going to have Mike Tyson in Ngannou's corner. I guess you can make the case that it's an attraction. So was Ali and Inoki an attraction.
Right.
But again, it's part of what we've been talking about. To me, it's another get over. Like everyone's feeding at the trough and everyone's winking at the same thing. Like, oh, we're getting paid.
Right.
And it may be a great attraction. Like when I first heard of McGregor and Mayweather, I remember people saying, "Oh, this is terrible." I thought it was great because it really was interesting, and we hadn't seen that before. And it turned out that McGregor could talk smack even better than Mayweather.
Yeah, he was good.
Okay, but the novelty of that kind of thing is worn off.
Right.
And now it's become the main event, and I don't blame Jake Paul at all, but and what Jake Paul does is really serious, and he respects the sport, but he's not. But we've turned the attraction into the main event.
Right.
I'm not diminishing anything Jake Paul is doing, but I think that not just Jake Paul, but all these exhibition, the market for these things, and I'm playing a little bit loose here, lumping in Jake Paul with Fury and Ngannou.
Right.
But the reason this stuff is happening is because boxing isn't giving you the fights that you should have as a fan, straight up. Best fight the best. Everyone talks about it, no one does it.
Right.
So this market arose for kind of extracurricular fights.
Okay, I agree. So I guess the last thing I want to ask is, arguably, not even arguably, the deepest, most exciting division in boxing, the lightweight division, has a handful of Haney, Shakur, Teo, Tank. who do you think is the cream of the crop? Who do you think, if they did a round robin tournament, would come out being able to beat everybody in that division?
Shakur.
Over Tank. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
My opinion, yeah. I mean, I don't think it'll happen for all the reasons that we've said.
Right.
And Shakur is going on how many years as a pro? 2016 turned pro, 2017.
He's still young though. Is he like 24?
You know, he still hasn't. No, how many rounds has he lost?
Right.
Part of it is he's not a destructive type of fighter in the sense that, or hasn't been, in the sense that like Tyson was always referred to, but he's more avoided.
Right.
Now, I mean, in fairness, listen, Haney's going to 140. And the fight I really want to see is like the Super Bowl of boxing dads is the Haney's versus the Tiafimo. I think that's like great. And, you know, Bill Haney has said he wanted it. I think the Tiafimo's dad is cool with it too. So when you ask me about lightweight, I'm assuming Haney moves up. But I still think when you strip everything away right now, it's Shakur.
Okay. I think it's Tank, but
do you think you'd ever see them fight?
Yes, I do. I think Tank and Shakur though has the makings to be one of the greatest fighters in history. But he's still relatively untested in terms of fighting the elite in the division, because really none of them have really fought each other. Just a couple fought each other.
But again, that's the problem. If you look at, I know I sound like an old fart. I apologize to everybody. But if you look at who Oscar had fought by the time he was 24, 25.
Fought everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah.
It's just people. That's why the sport was healthier.
Yeah. And guys like Jake Paul are helping it a little bit in terms of bringing a new fan base and getting new eyeballs on it that otherwise wouldn't have been there. So that's a good thing, at least.
I think it'd be a good thing if Jake Paul could get Shakur and Tank to fight. Then I think it'd be a really good thing if somehow he could do that.
I agree. Oh man. Well, Mark, I don't want to hold you any longer.
Do they still have Papaya King?
Where? In the city?
In the city.
I live in Brooklyn now.
Oh.
So
yes and no. There's still Papaya, right?
I think there is. Yeah, 72nd Street.
When I'm in town, you can buy me a papaya.
Definitely. Next time you're in town, let me know.
About New York.
Absolutely. It was good talking to you, and let's stay in touch.
Take care, brother. Bye-bye.
All right, man. Take care.